Welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we're going to be studying about modifiers in Java. And modifiers, we classify them into two categories. One, access modifiers, and two, non-access modifiers. By now, you are quite familiar with the public keyword, which we have been using in almost all our examples in the previous lessons. Perhaps what you may not have understood is its meaning and its context. So there are several kinds of modifiers. One, beginning with the public modifier. The public keyword is an access modifier, meaning that it is used to set the access level for classes, attributes, methods, and constructors. As we have said before, we divide modifiers into two groups: access modifiers, which control the access level, and access modifiers, which do not control the access level, but provide other functionality, which we are going to be learning later. So under access modifiers, we can group them into access modifiers for classes and those for attributes, methods, and constructors. So for classes, we either use public or default. So for classes, for your clarity, let's type that. So for classes, we either use the public or default access modifiers. Whenever we say that a class is public, or whenever we use the public modifier on a class, we mean that it can be accessed by any other class outside of it. The default modifier is the other kind of access modifier that we normally use on classes, and we use it whenever we do not specify any kind of modifier. For instance, if on our class, which we have declared as public class vehicle here, whenever we do not write any modifier, Java assumes that what we mean is that we mean to use the public modifier, the default modifier. So kindly note that whenever you are writing classes, there are two types of modifiers that you can use: public modifier and the default modifier. And whenever you do not specify any modifier, it is by assumed to be the default modifier. So what does a default modifier mean? The default modifier means that the class is only accessible by classes within the same package, and it is used whenever you don't specify any modifier. You may have realized that at the beginning of every class that we have written, there is this keyword package to specify the package or that this file belongs to, and the package name. For instance, our package is com.bsa.java tutorial. So what the default modifier means by saying that it gives access to all other classes that are in the same package is that every other class that is within the same package as the class vehicle can be able to access the values of this class or the methods of this class if they are within the same package whenever we are using the default modifier. So let's go to the access modifiers that we have for attributes, methods, and constructors. Which ones are they, and how do we use them? So for attributes, methods, and constructors, we use any of the following. We have the public modifier, we have the private modifier, and we have the default and protected modifiers. Protected and the default. So what do we mean by public? Public is of course to mean that it can be accessed by any other class. Private means that that method or that attribute or that constructor is only accessible within the declared class. Let's try to find out about the public and the private. So for instance, our class car here extends vehicle or inherits from vehicle, and that way it is able to access the methods accelerate, brake, and honk without giving us any errors, meaning that they are accessible. When we go to the class vehicle, we find that these methods are given the access level for public. What if we wrote them as private? Would we still have access to them? The answer is no. And when we come to the class car, as you can see, we now have an error, and that is because we cannot find the method accelerate. And the main reason is because we changed its access level from public to private. When we will change it again to public, just as it was before. As you would note that we now have access to it and the error is gone. So that is the difference between public and private. Public to mean that the code or the methods can be accessed outside of the class from where they have been defined, and private meaning that they can only be accessed only within the same class. What do we mean by the protected modifier? Access modifier. Protected means that the code is accessible in the same package and also for the subclasses, meaning that we can access all the other Java classes that are within that same package, and for those classes that are inherited can be able to access this modifier, the protected access modifier. For the default modifier, same as the class, as in the class definition, the code is only accessible within the same package, and it is only used whenever we do not specify a modifier. The next category of modifiers is access modifiers, non-access modifiers. Sorry. So we also have non-access modifiers, which give other functionality apart from setting access levels. So what are non-access modifiers? Non-access modifiers are modifiers that offer you other type of functionality apart from setting the access levels to either classes, attributes, or methods. So we have, for classes, we either have final or abstract in that category for non-access modifiers. So we can either use final or abstract. And whenever we use the final modifier, it means that that class cannot be inherited by any other class, meaning that we cannot extend from it. It cannot be a superclass to any other class. So for instance, if we come to our superclass vehicle and say that our class is going to be final, so our class is now public final class vehicle, we're going to experience an error telling us that we cannot inherit from final vehicle, meaning that whenever you use final in the class definition, it means that what you intrinsically mean is that you do not want any other class to inherit from it. So let's get it just as it was. Let's remove the final keyword and get it to be inheritable. That's the meaning of the final keyword. So the other modifier that you can use is abstract. And the abstract keyword is normally used for abstract classes, which we're going to be learning about the abstraction in a later lesson. But what it basically means is that for an abstract class, there is going to be methods for which definitions have not been defined, and they are going to be defined later in the inheriting class. So also, an abstract class cannot be used to create objects. That is the other part that you need to realize. So for instance, if our class car, if we were to define it as abstract, we would not be able to create an object, for instance, car1. So let's try that and find out. So we can say public abstract car class car, and whenever we try to create an object from it, it tells us that class car is abstract, and therefore it cannot be instantiated. So remember that whenever a class is abstract, or it has the abstract modifier, it means that you cannot be able to create objects from it. And the other part that you need to remember is that there are some methods that you can create that are abstract and will need implementation in the inheriting class or in the subclass. So from attributes and methods, we have also other modifiers that are non-access level modifiers, and they are as defined below, as we are going to define. We have the public, of course. We have public. Those are access modifiers. For non-access modifiers, we have final, static, abstract. Final, static, abstract. Let's find out what they all mean. So for the final keyword, it means that you do not want the methods or attributes to be overridden or modified, meaning that they are more constants. You do not want them to be overridden or modified. For the static modifier, it simply means that that method or that attribute belongs to the class rather than the object. So there is a concept of class attributes or class methods and object attributes and object methods. So whenever you use the static keyword, it means that that method belongs to the class rather than an object. You may have experienced the class, the static keyword, whenever we were defining especially the method main, we will define it as public static void main. And that is why this method, we did not have to create any object to access it because it was static. Static, as we have said, means that that method or that attribute belongs to the class. Any other method or any other attribute that does not belong to the class or that does not have the static keyword, it means that you need an object to access it. The third non-access modifier is the abstract modifier, and these can only be used within an abstract class and can only be used on abstract methods. To mean what? To mean that whenever you are using the abstract keyword on a method, the body is provided by the subclass from which is going to be inheriting from that class. We are going to be learning about abstraction later. So these are the non-access modifiers that you need to know. There are others, for instance, the transient, the synchronized, and the volatile, which we are going to be learning later. So for instance, for the transient, it means that attributes are skipped when serializing the object containing them. For the synchronized, the modifier, it means that the method can only be accessed one thread at a time. And for the volatile modifier, it means that the value of the attribute is not cached thread locally and is always read from the main memory. But for the last three, the transient, the synchronized, and the volatile, we have just mentioned them for your knowledge. They belong to, we are going to be learning them later in an advanced stage of the course. Thank you very much. So key takeaways from this video is about access modifiers and non-access modifiers, which modifiers you can use for classes, and which modifiers you can use for the attributes, methods, and constructors. So thank you very much. Keep learning. See you in the next lesson. Thank you.